and welcome to the Roy West Radio Show. I am Charlie Foxworth, standing in for the great Roy West today. This show can be heard every Sunday at noon on KLVI 560 AM or on any of your podcast apps that you have. You can find it through the iHeartRadio app. And I am super excited today. I've got some great guests lined up. I want to intro to you first an old friend of mine that I am so excited to have on the show today. And I'm going to introduce you to Elizabeth Waddill. There she is. Good morning, Elizabeth.
Good morning.
And Elizabeth is invested in giving back to our community. And as a result of giving back to our community, has branched this out to where she is really traveling around now, going to national parks and putting what I think is one of the biggest pieces as we come into our election season of bipartisan policy regarding national parks. And I'm going to look real quick because it is called the
Great American Outdoors Act.
That's it. So Please, Elizabeth Waddill, tell me about the Great American Outdoors Act.
Well, Charlie, first of all, thank you so much for having me on your show to talk about this, because it is such a happy, amazing bill that has been passed this summer. And, in this day and age, there's not many bipartisan bills, but the Great American Outdoors Act is one that both Republicans and Democrats could get behind and help fund our national parks. There is, I don't know if you're aware, but there is a huge maintenance backlog to our national parks. It's over $12 billion.
Wow.
And Charlie, it's a result of Congress not funding our national parks as much as they should be, because we've got to keep up the trails, the restrooms, the visitor center, so that people will want to go and experience, our national inheritance. Our national parks are our national treasures, and they bring us together. They provide, of course, outdoor recreation. They are our access to the American experience. There's over 400 units across the country.
And this was policy that was put into place. I remember was this in 19?
It was in 1916.
Yes, I was going to say 11 for some reason.
It was the Organic Act, which established the National Park Service.
Okay.
And so our National Park Service celebrated their centennial in 2016.
Okay.
And so you may remember that it was a big push, and all fourth graders got a free pass to all the national parks. It was the Every Kid in a Park campaign, and it was First Lady Barbara Bush and First Lady Michelle Obama did it together.
Awesome.
And it's just a great thing for us as Americans to be able to celebrate.
And so tell me a little bit about your experience. How did you go from Beaumont, Texas? Was it through like the Big Thicket and your exposure there that got you very interested in these parks around the country?
Good question. I've always been interested in conservation. And my good friend Vivian Todd invited me to a lunch with her friends that were part of the Texas Regional Office for the National Parks Conservation Association.
Okay.
And so I'm going to refer to that as the NPCA. And what they are is an advocacy group for the national parks. The first director of the Park Service, Stephen Mather, said there needs to be an outside organization, advocate organization for the national parks that's not inside the federal government. Okay. And so they can be non-biased and really just have the national parks as their first priority. This is a nonpartisan organization, and they advocate on behalf of the over 400 national parks across the country. And so Vivian invited me to lunch, And they asked me to be on their regional council. I said, of course I would, and Vivian's on it as well. And then they asked me to be on their national board, and so I've been doing that for about 6 years, and it's incredible. I've learned so much. It's taught me the gifts that our national parks give to our country, and they are so many, and we just really need to be good stewards and take care of it, and that's why this bill is so very important.
And the bill itself, does it actually force funding for national parks, or what does the bill actually do?
Well, it does two big things. It establishes a fund of $6.5 billion over 5 years, and to a fund called the National Parks and Public Land Legacy Restoration Fund. That's a mouthful.
Yeah.
To help address this $12 billion in needed repairs for crumbling roads, trails, restrooms, like I mentioned before. And then it also does another thing that's very important. It guarantees the permanent and full funding of the existing Land and Water Conservation Fund. And for those that are we call it LWCF for short.
Yeah, okay, slow down for just a second. So it guarantees the funding of the Land and Water
Conservation Fund.
Okay.
And let me tell you a little bit about that.
Please.
Okay. Well, it's a federal program that was established by Congress in 1965, and it provides funds and matching grants to federal, state, and local governments.
Okay.
So that, maybe a city park, it's for state parks. It's also for like in holdings and in national parks as well. And so it's state and federal, and it's not taxpayer money. It is the money comes from royalties from offshore oil and gas.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's, it's a win-win, as they say.
Yeah. And win-win or no deal. That's one of our beliefs. Everybody's got to win. And
that's right. That's
awesome. So we're funding. Golly. So this is a complicated animal that you were involved in.
It's and it, what I want to say this. It is years of people advocating, making calls, visiting with their congressperson, and it's so important to let your voice be heard on what matters. And this is bipartisan. Our Congress people were listening, and they knew how important this was. This isn't something that just came up last year. This is years in the making. This is the biggest conservation law in 50 years.
Wow.
And it's something to celebrate and something to be happy about, because these are hard times, and we all have loved our open spaces during this time.
And for a politician, obviously extremely distracting with all the shiny objects going on out there when you get people coming in talking about we need money for our national parks, trying to get people together to take care of that has got to be an additional burden. I know individually, just from trying to get the Neches River deepened and widened for our industry here locally, that was a 20-year project. And so I appreciate the effort that it takes to get those kind of things funded, particularly when there's an outside funding source involved and it's not necessarily coming through the government, because then you've got to negotiate that whole thing. So kudos to you and your group.
Well, it is many people across the country that have this is important. And the LWCF has only been fully funded twice, and that, not to get too wonky on you, but it's supposed to be $900 million in revenue, from the oil and gas. The idea was to take from one resource and put it into another resource, our parks, our city parks, our state parks, our ball fields, and etc. So it's a win-win. And not to mention, Charlie, the jobs, in fixing our parks and all the jobs for infrastructure that's going to create. And just a little tidbit, we're right by the big thicket.
Yeah.
Thicket National Preserve. Parks are not just these grand parks. They're preserves, they're national monuments, they're battlefields, they're national recreation areas. So we're so lucky that we have one in our backyard.
Yes.
and it has such an economic impact on our community.
Absolutely.
And so I've heard it been said that for every dollar you put into fixing a park, it's $10 that goes back to the community, in the form of vendors and tourism and that sort of thing. And this Great American Outdoors Act, to talk about it closer to home at the Big Thicket, I understand has $6 million of maintenance needs. So, for trails and buildings and that sort of thing. So it's a very needed investment.
Well, and we are thrilled to have somebody like you out there representing all of us to bring it home. So anyway, with how can folks look up, find out about your group?
Okay, the National Parks Conservation Association, or NPCA. You can Google it. It's npca.org. It is a membership-driven organization. Become a member. It's great information on parks. You get a magazine. Every couple months, and anyway, just it's a great organization.
Fantastic.
And they're doing like virtual talks right now on parks, since we can't really travel and that sort of thing. But check it out.
Anyway, great. Elizabeth Waddill, you are a superior human being. Thank you so much for joining me on here today.
This has been fun.
Yeah, you're amazing.
About these good things.
We'll do it again. We'll keep on going, but you have a great rest of the day, and we will be back in just a second. Thank you very much.
Thanks.